Grant, O Lord, that um, may we be able to fulfill our life's purpose and at the same time, Lord, give purpose for others. This we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Saint John Baptist de La Salle, pray
Pray
for
for
Pray for us
us forever. And
forever.
forever.
all right, so kamusta ka mo? Champion ka mo? Sino nag-champion?
CBA.
CBAs. Ito.
Ikapilayakas.
Second. Tayo sila with nursing.
Mo ba? Dako banse? Sorry, hindi ko updated. Ano man mga
Sige.
online ninyo nga team. Alright, sige. So, basically, we will have, sano gani, do you have the schedule sa inyong end term? We only have like around 4 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Last week of April will be your exam. If I'm not mistaken. Let me check again. Schedule of exam. All right. Sige. So basically right now we would be coursing through the most interesting subject, which is already in the family code. Our approach here is very much different from your prelim and midterm because by this time we will do things conceptually. We're not gonna do things based on the premises on each article. We're gonna jump through each topic, and then by each topic, we will correlate the corresponding articles relative to it. Okay, so just to give you an overview of what is being expected from you is that their essential coverage for our ano siya tawag? For our end term would cover something like this one. All right, here. Yeah, readjust that. Okay. All right. Okay, so mostly, if you would be able to see, end term coverages would be very long, but it will require you to really read in advance. So my plan is actually to give you just like when we had our prelim recitations, the questions are actually released or given to you, and you would need to research and find it either in the source material, through the book, or in some other references of which you will be able to um, find the answer. So basically, nobody gets to graduate from this class without defining what is marriage, without defining what is family. So please expect that either when we get to have our one of the end term quizzes, you will need to provide or fill in your answers or fill in the blanks for defining what is marriage, what is family. And also this requires a lot of memory work by the same reason that it's going to be a challenge for you to memorize what are the respective requisites, to know the different classifications, because these are the fundamental things. Say for instance, if we're gonna go back with the fundamental things such as how do you define marriage and how do you classify the essential requisites, including the formal requisites. So what are the requisites of marriage? And then included with it, we're gonna discuss kay different siya. What I mean different is that each of the requisite will have its own in-depth discussion. And I leave it to you to actually discover that by trying to read the correlative articles under the family code. Why? Because again, the principle is very much basic. You really need to know your fundamentals. And in doing so, it's not just enumerating the requisites. It's going to make discussions. And that's usually what happens in the study of law. For you to know how you are going to properly apply the provisions. Now, I jumped into property relations governing marriages because it is going to deal with, say, for instance, the different property regimes. Some of you may have a little or some insights about it, but it's very important for you to not only know them, but for you to actually know the limitations and how it is being distinguished from the other property regimes. So medyo heavy na siya. I'm going to set your expectations that end term would be one of those instances that really would really require you to dig in and really open your books and read them. Now, of course, in several instances, a chapter under the family code would deal with void and voidable marriages. So we will deal a little about remedial law or procedural law in a sense that what kind of legal action will you undertake for you to have your marriage considered as void, or what are those instances wherein the marriage would be considered as voidable. Okay, so we will try to define the lines. For an ordinary layman, void and voidable marriage are just the same for them. But for the learned legal profession, it requires that there must be a distinction truly made. Why? Because it will define what kind of route or what kind of process you are going to invoke to the different courts to be able to have your marriage be declared void or annulled. Okay? Then we also have with us a study about legal separation. Well, the overview, just the important parts would be very essential. The overview of it. Say, for instance, what are the grounds when you're going to say that it is a legal separation? What would make it different from the other remedies, such as declaring your marriage void or having it annulled? So at this instance, it will give you an idea. Maybe some of you it may discourage you from getting married, but at least it's going to give you the correct insight under the law. All right. Now, of course, dapat yan actually mauna gid na ang kung ano ang rights and obligations between husband and wife. Before katani dapat makabalo kung nga mapakasal ka, intindihon mo anay kung ano ang mga obligasyon mo kung ikaw ang mangin husband or ikaw ang mangin wife. Then in the practical sense, you also need to understand that there are correlative rights that are given to you. So essentially, that should be in the cycle of marriages. Dapat kabalo kagid anong ginasudlan mo. So it's part of the discussion way behind the book. But nonetheless, this is just the outline of the essential coverage. Ha. I'm not yet trying to state ano ang unahon ta discuss or ano ang essential parts nga ano ang i-try ta discuss ahead. Now, we also going to discuss the constitution of a family home, the importance of it, and in particular, how the family home is being constructed. It's not just the building, it's not just the particular structure that you have, but how does the law look into the creation of a family home? We're also going to talk about the effects of marriages, such as in instance about paternity and filiation. Paternity and filiation will discuss more or less who are children to be considered as legitimate children and who are children who are considered to be illegitimate children. And there's actually a third kind of category, and that is legitimated children. So an overview about paternity and filiation is it actually is the reference of those circumstance wherein, number one, si papa mo may bata nga iban. How does this affect your rights as a legitimate child? Or if you are the illegitimate child, how does this affect you and your rights towards your compulsory legitimates or being a compulsory heir? Uh, it sounds as if it's going to be complicated, but it's this is one of the bedrocks of Philippine drama in the cinemas and in television because number one, mas relate ni siya and mas grabbing impact niya. So usually amo na ng si Don Jaime may bata gali sa gwa ang ging pabusungan niya ang iyang labandera sa ilang bukid. So we go may tuhaw na lang siya gali ang tagapagmana. Mga amo na. So how do you usually prove that you are the illegitimate child or the child of this one person or this individual? So it's very important in the cycle of the family life. Then of course, part of the obligation here is to provide support. So basically, these are the essential things. Um, if you would look under the several discussions under your book, it will actually lead you to one or two things about first defining what are the essential marital requisites. So if most of you who have been aware already, ang pinaka-importante ginada is, okay. So basically, you need to understand the intro about the family law, anay, about the family code. So the family code, when it's important for you to know when did the family code started. Why is it important? Sige. Any idea? Why do you think it's important that you would know when is the family code effective? I think I made this a discussion previously, right? I'm not sure. Wala ka mo idea? Wala pa. Sige. Before we gonna discuss academically, what are things in questions regarding the family life are supposed to be kakabatian nyo sa drama, kakabatian yung mga conflict scenarios or circumstances that kumbaga it would propel your interest to understand what does the law say about these circumstances. Sige. Anyone? This is just an open discussion. Hindi pa ko gusto
Attorney.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I think ang mistress, attorney, or mistress and sometimes abuse as well.
Abuse ang husband or ang wife?
Actually either pwede and as well as children.
Okay. So part of it. Actually, there's a discussion about parental authority. I don't know if we can be able to touch that, but sige, it's a nice to know thing for now. Pero hindi gid man siya amo na ka-in-depth ang discussion ta. Pero that's a valid point when we're gonna discuss parental authority over the children. Instances naman niya for the mistresses, well, it's important because they can be basis or grounds for having your marriage declared void or declared it ano ni siya to retrieve property. That's why kung hindi mo niya ma-divorce ang idea nga how does this affect the property regime of the husband and wife. Right. So other points, other mga discussions nga that can actually propel your interest to know more about marriage and family life.
Attorney, good evening.
Sige, go.
I think it's more on the property relations between husband and wife and the support bala in the part of the parents. Like in the cases of illegitimate children, ano ang qualifications or requirements para ang illegitimate children makalagas ang support? from the father, the mother.
That's also true because in reality, again, there are instances wherein before ka makapangayo, kung pilagid ang you are entitled to under the law, do isa ka terbang challenge of it's like a mountain that you need to hurdle to prove your status as first an illegitimate child. Because number one, kung may isa nga pareho scenario lang niya because I don't know if would pique your interest. But there are instances wherein what if patay na ang tatay? And nagpapatay ng tatay, may nagtuhaw nga bata, gambal, ako ang isa sa mga anak ni Don Emilio. Then usually for us, when you're gonna refer it to instances in the uh, Pinoy drama serye, tiyan mo na, mata-DNA test, o paano na siya, proof kung paano na siya naging bata. And then, ano ang recourse naman niya sa mga legitimate children? Or who has the better right to identify or what procedure for you to present that this person claiming to be a child of my father is also going to be entitled for it. So, kapos lang, no? At least, kasi sa inyo, kung, I am the illegitimate child of Henry C. Sr. O, kita mo, nahililibito sila sa, sa Memorial Park, tapos ikaw yan, nagtuhaw ka lang to, and then you're gonna claim that he had an affair over something. So, amo lang ning lain when we're discussing with Philippine drama because they're bastardizing how the law is going to be used. Just to fit into the narrative of the story. But actually, that's actually a reality as mentioned by your classmate, about how it affects the sharing and the property regime. Sige. Ano pa? Ano pa that can pique your interest over instances of the discussion? Mga ma-recall nyo balati, basi di nyo di makita ang mga sabat. Sige, go ahead.
Attorney, excuse me.
Yes, go Hannah.
Since family is the basic unit of the society and Philippine Constitution protects the sanctity of marriage, and it's quite difficult here in our country to have a easy way to have your marriage legally separate, unlike other country that has divorce law. So maybe Philippine family code can somehow help us understand, um, since other people wants to have their marriage void or make it voidable. So maybe Philippine family code have these certain grounds in order to make that happen, like such as psychological incapacity, and on others use that grounds in order to have the marriage voidable, and also to protect the rights of both parties in terms of conjugal properties and such.
All right, sige. That's also very interesting because again, we're now gonna deal with not just the effects of marriage, but how do you get away from a bad marriage? But there's the psychological aspect of that. So anong recourse kisa? In all honesty, budlay pa diri sa jurisdiction sa Pilipinas ang makakuha sang hustisya in terms of trying to dissolve the marriage. As we speaking right now, someone just messaged me and then asking me, no attorney, nang mangkot kami tani, ano ang first step for annulment? As in every day, there is actually someone who is trying to get out of that situation. And for you to be a learned individual, siguro in one point, it can be you. I hope it's not. But it can be someone that you know that is suffering from this kind of abusive relationship and wants to get out of it. Siguro amo na siya. The more na gani amo na ginapagwa when we're discussing this is the more that you study this in the family code, the more that you would get to be more practical in terms of trying to understand if you're not fully decided to make sacrifices, exceptions, and at the same time be able to face the challenges of the married life, then you might as well not to. So, isa na da siya, tsaktogin na siya ginambal ni Hannah nga there are people who would want to dissolve their marriages. Sometimes they do not know how. Sometimes they're not guided by the law. So, in here, you will be able to understand and know that fully well. Sige. Ano pa? Ano pa? As I'm telling you right now, again, I've been inching, we're inching our way to the really meat of the subject of the family code and the family law. Because we usually discuss right away, muna, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, not realizing bala, nga, it's so spread out. The provisions of the family code uh, are really intended not just to protect the husband and wife from each other, but to protect the institution of family and the marriage. Kaya others really do not know the extent of the consequences of their action when they're doing this. Sige, ano pa? Other discussions you'd think that would help you? Anyone? Hindi niya resit. This is more of a discussion. Nga do ka think mo mas ma-apply mo yan sa life mo. Kita mo. Tayo sinabla. Hindi mo man lang pag-ihambal nga imo na siya nga life. Kamalang mo lang ang friend ko bala attorney, ang iya nga papa, as in, ikapila na kami nga pamilya. Ano ang rights namon bilang the third family nga ginambal? Oh, see? May isa pa ginada. May instances nga attorney nga amon ding father ging abandon na kami wala gid siya gahatag sang support or why niya kami ginapaskwela kung magdaog lang siya sa sabong dra lang siya mahatag sa amon mga mga storya sang pangabuhi nga kamatuoran pero this is actually just a prelude to some of those people who do not understand the law. I mean, muna, at least kamo do ka may idea kamo because you're studying it. But really, there are individuals who are so ignorant about these instances. I had a case wherein, in one instance, among the requirements for marriage is that you need to have the essential requisites and the formal requisites. Di ba? Na-discuss na siya initially. The essential requisites requires two things. What are those two things? So memory work, it should have what? The legal capacity and that consent must be freely given. So an individual must have the legal capacity. It's not just enumerating it. For you to understand, what does legal capacity mean? It could mean into the essence of age. It could also mean in the essence of the mind and the legal capacity. Or it's not just about age. It's about what does your nationality allow you? Maybe you're 65 years old and you're a British national. You want to get married here in the Philippines. But the Philippine law would need more proof that you can enter into a valid marriage. Therefore, we will request that you secure an affidavit or a clearance from your embassy that states that you have the legal capacity to get married. So sa una, ang legal capacity sa pag-insindita, mo lang ni edad, circumstansya kung sa diin wala ka na nakasal. It's beyond that. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because it's not just an enumeration. It's going to require you to study, deal with it. And it's really the beauty of what the law, the study of the law really can be applied. So, other instance naman, consent is freely given. When can you say that there is consent? When can you say that it is freely given? What would be the circumstance that deprives you of your consent? And so, diri naman siya, makita nyo pag ma-relate ang ano na siya, Philippine drama about shotgun wedding. Di ba? Kita ka na sa mga comedy lang, oh, ikakasal ka sa asawa ko, sa anak ko. Tapos tulog ka sa iyang anak na kaluhilaw. Ay, isang tsura sa anak niya. Tapos tulog ka man sa pare. Pag tulog sa pare, mo tulog ka sa tatay sa bahay. Tapos, opo, father, opo. So those are instances that actually makes you think, though it sounds funny, but ang iyang legal effect is actually, it creates already this particular notion. Now, when we go to formal requisites, what are the formal requisites that we have? We have a valid marriage license. Okay? Just like when you're conducting an activity, you need to acquire a license. Meaning to say that in the principle of licensing, or the principle of trying to execute licenses, it is a privilege that is extended by the state to you. You cannot just get married without the consent of the state. That's why ginambal ni isang iban ko nga mga professors in some books, marriage is not just the commitment of one individual to the other. Do you agree with that statement, class? Mamala siya. Mamala siya. Yes, sir. Marriage is not just one person to the other. Why? So others would eloquently say, well, marriage involves also the family of the bride and the groom for the establishment of their family life. What else? What else? Why is it that you agree? Because mga tinunto na daw yung because there are instances, Your Honor, that the marriage between the husband and wife involves third party to spice up the marriage. Muna sa not realizing ang ginapangita lang yun actually answer is that the third party is not just any other individual, but ang iban ganit, they go as far as spiritual. They would say na it's not just the husband and wife, but also it's a commitment including God. Since we are studying the principles of law, then of course we also need to apply that the third party here in the marriage would involve, number one, who? It would involve the state. The state is a definitive character in trying to arrange or trying to settle family life or marriage. So when is that actually applicable? It is applicable when you look into marriage licenses. Hindi ka lang yan kapag gusto pakasal. But kay pera, ano na siya, entrada, there is also exception. The general rule is that there is a requirement for you to have a marriage license. But there are several instances that will exempt an individual from what? From acquiring or entering into a marriage without need of marriage license. Okay? So be able to be aware of that. Okay. So any other who wants to share? Kung ano pang, yes, go ahead, Stacy. Yes, Stacy. Wala na? Anyone? Wala na? Otherwise, I thought Stacy was raising her hand. So wala na? Okay. Sige.
Attorney, can you hear me? Sorry.
Okay. Now we can hear you.
Nag-miss yung mic ko, attorney. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Attorney, is it okay if I ask a hypothetical question?
Sige.
Since we're talking about the family code, we're going to be talking about requisites on what makes a marriage voidable naman or void. So what if
Yeah, let's correct that statement first before I forget it. You look at the requisites for validity. Okay, requisites for validity. The moment it does not fit into the requisite, then it can either be void or voidable. Right?
Yes, attorney, but my question is, let's say there is a foreigner that wants to marry a Filipina or a Filipino,
Mm,
and they will be requesting the legal capacity of that person from that country. So what if that person, the legal capacity that the country allows that person to marry at the age of 17?
mm.
So how is that, an attorney? How what's the effect of that towards the Filipino side naman, attorney?
All right. So that's a very good question. By the same reason that you will go back to the provision on Article 17. Okay? If you would go back to the provision on Article 17, it states there that the principle of lex loci celebrationis, wherein forms and solemnities which are executed even outside are valid there. But say for instance, if the laws come to other country um, would allow certain things, but in our jurisdiction, they are considered to be prohibitive, then we will not be able to honor them. Let's make it a more specific example. Say, for instance, the one that you're claiming to have legal capacity is not just by age, it's about his gender. So, say for instance, this individual who claims to be a foreign national, which is a male individual who then had a sex change or sex operations, gender change, or ang iyang ano, iyang external organ has been changed or removed. And then he's trying to come in and marry in the Philippines on a different persona, babae na siya. For us, we still consider that as a prohibitive um, ano na siya, prohibitive act or account which is still mandatory on our jurisdiction. So in the instance that you have, so the softer example that you're trying to set is that 17 years old siya, pwede sila ka-get married. But in this instance, when we are looking at the provisions of our family code, which requires that there are particular criteria that should fall to be mandatorily followed, then we shall follow that. If there is a deviation towards that, then we will not allow that. Okay? All right, Stacy? So you
Thank
want
you,
to get
attorney.
married with the 17-year-old?
Hypothetical, attorney.
Hypothetical. Yes, of course, of course, of course. Hypothetical. Now, so again, we're simply trying to kumbaga know the problem. It's like Jeopardy. If you've seen the movie game show Jeopardy, the answers are already given ahead, and then the questions would be your answers. So here it's the reverse process. We're actually learning. I'm actually soliciting from you instances of which when the problem or the circumstance arise, and then instead of going to the articles of telling us, Monisha, how do you apply this article? We're going to look into the problem, and then by that, knowing that problem, you will be able to find the solutions and correspondence under the provisions of the family code. Okay? Sige. Any other? Wala na? Like to share other circumstance? Sige. Say for instance, what about those individuals who have cohabited? What would be the property relations that would be involved with them? They did not get married. Live-in, live-in. So muna ni mga generation subong. What would be the definition of their property relations? Would there be a kumbaga marriage by ano ni siya? By estoppel? You know what estoppel is? Wala. ESTOPPL. Estoppel. Okay. So estoppel is something like this. If you have made representations and claim that this is correct, in the future, you will not be able to deny such representation or admissions of the previous. So pareho sina, sagi ka claim nga muna. Actually, you could have read that in the provision under juridical entities, sa juridical persons. A juridical person usually, di ba, what are the different kinds of juridical person? We have private and we have public juridical persons. In public corporations, such as juridical public corporations, juridical public persons, they usually become or they are vested with a personality when they are registered by law. Diba? Nag-corporation ka, nagpa-rehistro ka sa Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, when you have done that, you will be recognized as a corporation for all intents and purposes. But say for instance, wala ka nagpa-register, naghimo ka lang niya sa instances wherein being represent mo ang self mo that you belong into a corporation and that when you belong to that corporation, you dealt with several people. You had several transactions with them. And then these people that you've transacted with eventually wants to sue you because you have breached certain protocols of your obligation or your contracts. Now, you cannot claim that, number one, I am not registered under Securities and Exchange Commission. I am not a corporation. And those individuals that you have dealt with or you've duped or into cannot invoke kuno abe that you are a corporation. But under the principle of estoppel, you are stopped from being claiming that you do not have the legal requisites because you have made representations already that you are a corporation. And you will be vested under the law, you will be prosecuted under the law to be an individual who is what? Liable as a corporation by estoppel. Okay? So, please have that. Yes, Hannah.
I just want to ask, what if that person registered himself in the Securities of Exchange and Commission? Would he or she be able to be again recognized as a corporation?
Yeah,
Again?
it legitimizes now his status, di ba? It will now, you're referring to a corporation by estoppel and then eventually they registered as a corporation sa SEC.
Yes. Yes.
They're practically
They were already, but he was already declared as an estoppel. But afterwards, he registered himself to SEC. So would that be still credible or would that be
well, I mean, the principle of estoppel is actually there under the rule on equity. Meaning, for fairness sake, kung ikaw ga-represent ka nga isa ka korporasyon tapos nanginto ka, hindi kaya kahambal nga hindi ka korporasyon kay tungod that you were technically not observing the requisites under the law. So the idea here is that when you are declared a corporation by estoppel, you will be tried and be considered as if you were a corporation. Now, in your instance, when he has become considered as a corporation by estoppel, he eventually in the future would legitimize its status by being able to register sa SEC. Then he has already cured the defect of being a corporation by estoppel. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Sige, thank you. So why am I telling you or sharing you about this? It's because, again, we are going to talk about the ideas and principles on representation. Amo ni bala ang ginahambal ko sa ang circumstance to bala what property regime governs the relationship of those individuals who have not acquired the benefit of marriage. Okay? So for instance, ginapagwa mo nga ang ini siya nga babae, ako ni siya nga wife. So in our jurisdiction again, we do not have common law wife. A common law wife is someone that you interpose and claim that he or she is your partner or wife. But in fact and in truth and in legal perspective, has never been vested by authority or by law to be your wife because you have not undergone the necessary requisites for it. So those are some of the interesting things. Nga, say for instance, gilibin-libin lang ka mo. And then eventually you've acquired certain properties. How would you know what kind of property regime that it involves you? Okay? So that may be answered later on in some of the questions that we will have for family code. All right. Other things that you need to consider. Siguro just a little bit lang ang introduction for the subject under the family code. Sige. Please take note that this part of the introduction under the family code, we've already changed a lot of provisions under the civil code. So damo na siya ging change. It may not be applicable anymore. Please note also that the Executive Order 209, also known as your Family Code of the Philippines, is the one that is fully in effect by what? By the instance that ano ni siya? Ng an executive order by the then late President Cory Aquino. And it took effect by around 1987. I was asking you the question, why is it very important for you to know when is the effectivity of the family code? Number one, it's very important because it will redefine what kind of the default property regime that you have. Ang iban sa inyo, mangkuton nyo na si nanay kag ni tatay nyo, kung nagpakasal na sila, kabalo ka mo kung ano ang property regime nyo. Mambal na sila, ano na yung property regime na naman? Wait, tagani property. No, those some of instances of them, they are not fully aware how the law has defined their property relations. But as we mentioned in the essential coverage, we will know about the different property regimes. So please, Article 1 is among the very essential things that you need to have, because this actually defines what is a marriage. What is a marriage? So in trying to utilize that, please note that there will be a distinction between marriage and an ordinary contract. It's found in the book, which actually makes the distinction between an ordinary contract and a marriage. So in anticipation, please note that in an ordinary contract, there is what we call parties involved. In a marriage, it is both a contract and a social institution. Your contract may be just privately between you and another individual. Say for instance, a contract of a deed of sale. Baligyan nyo ang property nyo. It's one individual involving the other. But in a marriage, when you're entering into this contract, there is also an indication that this is not just an ordinary contract. It goes above it. So in ordinary contracts, you can stipulate terms and conditions in your ordinary contract. But generally in a marriage, you cannot stipulate. Say for instance, nagpakasal ta. Sa aton nga marriage contract, allowed ko mga bit during the times of November and December. Ikaw naman niya, allowed ka sa January kag February. Okay? So kung hindi na gani siya amo nga period, then it could be considered as a breach for you. That's not allowed. That's the instance of the social institution aspect. And that also is the concept that the stipulations are fixed by law. The only thing that you can fix as a stipulation is the property regime or your marriage settlement, which you need to do before the marriage. That's why this is your term for prenuptial agreements. May mga prenup ka mo. Amo na bala nga kung bilyonaryo ka, tapos pakaslan mo, hindi ka sure kung ang ginapakaslan sa imo is ang imo nga pagkagwapo or ang imo nga pagkamanggaranon. So, usually people would claim, okay, um, for our marriage settlement, the property relation is that we're completely separated. What is mine is mine, what is yours. Or you can also include that in the instance that the marriage will be dissolved, for each year of marriage, the wife is entitled to at least 5 million. Wow, muna ka grabe ah. I was able to see a contract drafted such nature. So for each year of being married to this very wealthy individual, this person is entitled to receive 5 million. That is in the instance is wala nag-cheat ang babae. Okay? Kag ang nagsala would be the husband kung nag-cheat. So there's a lot of things, but it usually involves the money aspect of it. But the other stipulations such as amo to, ginambal ko sa inyo nga um, the husband is allowed to cohabit with anyone that he likes so long as with the consent of the wife, na hindi niya pwede. Alright? So, other instances, the marriage can be dissolved only by the death or annulment and not by mutual agreement. In instances, a contract may be dissolved by mutual agreement by the parties or by some other legal issues. So, you would definitely know the main discussion and distinctions for that. So, all right. Now, we will be able to discuss in next week. The next time we're gonna meet is on Monday next week. Sige lang. So just in ano lang, we're just going over this, but the moment we're gonna discuss this, I hope you would be able to read, at least browse into the discussions here. I'll be preparing the questions ahead so that maybe you try to research and pique your interest over it, and then eventually, who knows, you'd know more of the answer than the required one by your research. All right? Sige. Okay. So by this instance, siguro I'll just announce that maybe by within this week or next week also, your grades would be up. I have not finished checking your exams and with the other individuals, but just the same. Siguro I'll post it, man. I'll post um, the grades and duly notify everybody about it. Okay. Sige. Any other concerns? Any other ano? So please, we're already on the part of the family code. Try to read. I do promise that I will let you read the landmark decisions about the family, about family law. Say for instance, how does the Supreme Court, or how will you invoke psychological incapacity? If you find that in Article 36 on the Family Code, it's just going to state there that it can be one of the reasons for the nullity of the marriage. But how do you invoke that? So usually the court, the Supreme Court, would lay down the guidelines on evidentiary facts on how you will be able to present that there is indeed psychological incapacity existing over this individual. Madugo na siya, but it's going to be, at least it's gonna make you aware. So sa dason siguro, you'll be able to read most of it. All right, so if there's no other question, I'll let you be so that you can have your early dinner na hudaan. Okay? And please utilize this time to reflect for the Holy Week. Pamalandong mo. Right? Are there other questions? May questions ba? Wala na? Okay. So with that, thank you very much. Leave Jesus in our hearts.
Forever.
Right. You can go.
Thank you,
Thank you,
attorney.
attorney.
Thank you, attorney.
Thank you,
Thank you,
attorney.
attorney.